Diary entry number 2. The little girl who grew up too fast. Hi, I'm a soft-spoken survivor. Welcome to the Nervous System Diaries. The truth is, I spent most of my life learning how to survive. Long before I found myself in an abusive relationship, I was a little girl trying to make sense of a world that didn't always feel safe. When people hear the word abuse, they often imagine one event, one person, or one relationship. But sometimes the groundwork is laid long before that. Sometimes it starts in childhood. Sometimes it starts in places that are supposed to feel the safest. I learned early that adults weren't always people you could trust. I learned that people who were supposed to protect you could also be the people that hurt you. And that's a confusing lesson for a child, because children don't have the ability to step back and say, hey, this isn't right. Children just adapt. They learn the rules of whatever environment they're in, and the rules I learned were simple. Stay quiet. Don't make anyone angry. Don't need too much. Don't take up too much space, and don't make mistakes. Looking back now, I realized how young I was when I started carrying responsibilities and emotions that didn't belong to me. As a child, I felt like sometimes I wasn't wanted, and for much of my childhood, I was shoved off to my great-grandmother's house. I mean, granted, she loved me. I want to make that clear, but she was in her 80s. She deserved to support herself. She deserved her peace. She deserved to enjoy her later years. Instead, she found herself helping raise a child. As an adult, I can look back and see how impossible that situation really was. At the time, though, I didn't have these words. I just knew I felt different. I knew I felt like I was being passed around, like nobody quite knew what to do with me, like I was everyone's responsibility and nobody's responsibility at the same time. And when you're a child, it's hard not to internalize that. You start wondering if there's something wrong with you. You start asking questions that you don't even know you're asking. Why am I here? Why doesn't anyone want me? Why do I feel like a burden? Of course, I wasn't actually a burden. I was a child. But see, children don't often see things through adults' eyes. They see things through hurt eyes. And hurt children often blame themselves for circumstances they never created. There were also punishments, the kind that many people dismiss with phrases like, that's just how things were back then. Belts, switches, fear. Not discipline, fear. The kind of fear where you become hyper-aware of every mood in the room. The kind of fear where your stomach drops before footsteps even reach the doorway. The kind of fear that teaches you to constantly scan your environment because you're trying to figure out whether you're safe. I became very good at reading people. Very good at predicting moods. Very good at staying small. At the time, I thought those were our strengths. Now, I understand those were survival skills. Survivor skills are interesting because they help you survive in one environment, but they often follow you into the next one. By the time I reached adulthood, I didn't realize how much of my life was being guided by those early lessons. I didn't know that I had spent my years learning to tolerate discomfort, to explain away any bad behavior, to accept things that hurt me, to keep the peace at my own expense. I wasn't choosing chaos because I wanted chaos. I wasn't seeking pain. I wasn't trying to make my life harder. I was choosing what felt familiar. And familiar can be dangerous because familiar often feels safer than healthy, even when it isn't. And that's one of the reasons I started this podcast. Not just to talk about what happened during those 16 years, but to understand the story that came before them. Because sometimes abuse doesn't begin when the relationship begins. Sometimes it begins earlier. When our child learns that love and fear can exist in the same room. When safety becomes unpredictable. when survival becomes normal. And that's where my story begins. A question people might have is, why were you staying with your great-grandmother in the first place? Well, the answer's kind of complicated. My mom had me when she was very young. She was still trying to figure out her own life while raising a child. And my father wasn't there. He basically abandoned me at a young age. So as a result, I spent much of my childhood with my great-grandmother. When you're little, you don't fully understand the reasons behind those decisions. You just know what they feel like. And what it felt like to me was being somewhere in between. I wasn't fully being raised by my mom, but I was staying at my great-grandmother's house, and she wasn't really in a position to raise me. She basically needed me to help her with her life, and I basically became a caretaker at a very early age. She was already in her 80s. Looking back now, I can see how much she carried. At the time, though, I didn't see any of that. I just knew I wanted to belong somewhere. I wanted to feel like somebody's first choice. I wanted to feel like I had a place where I was fully wanted, fully protected, and fully safe. And that's what she was. Instead, I often felt like I was being passed from one set of circumstances to another. And that's not to say there wasn't love. There was. But love and stability aren't always the same thing. Love and safety aren't always the same thing. And when you're a child, those differences matter. As an adult, I can look back with compassion for people involved. But I can also acknowledge what it felt like as a child living through it. And what it felt like was lonely. For me, I started to crave attention. Like I would go out of my way to make people laugh. I ended up being the class clown a couple of times because I loved the way it made me feel inside. I often was the friends of all the friends because I never wanted anybody to feel as alone as I did. I had a lot of stuff going on in my childhood, which I'll tell in another podcast. But this is just what it felt like as a child for me. Lonely. Like so unwanted. And so I guess what I'm saying is I wanted to have love and affection and safety and stability. And I never had that. But for now, that's enough for this diary entry. I am a soft-spoken survivor, and you have just listened to A Nervous System Diaries. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and share.